Towards a New Socialism. Section. The Acephalous State. A neoclassical democracy would still be a state in the Marxian sense. It would be an organized public power to which minorities are forced to submit. The demos would use it to defend their rights against any remaining or nascent exploiting class. But it would be acephalous, a state without a head of state, without the hierarchy that marks a state based on class exploitation. The various organs of public authority would be controlled by citizens' committees chosen by lot. The media, the health service, the planning and marketing agencies, the various industries would have their juries. Each of these would have a defined area of competence. A committee for the energy industry, for instance, would decide certain details of energy policy, but it could not disregard a popular vote, say, to phase out nuclear power. The membership of the committees need not be uniformly drawn from the public. The health service committees could be made up partly of a random sample of health service workers and partly of members of the public. As Bernheim argues, the principle should be that all those who have a legitimate interest in the matter should have a chance to participate in its management. This view is radically different from both social democracy and the practice of hitherto existing socialism. Planning, for example, is not under government control, but under a supervisory committee of ordinary citizens, who, since they are drawn by lot, will be predominantly working people. In the sense that they are autonomous of any government, these committees can be thought of as analogous to the autonomous bodies of bourgeois civil society. Independent central banks, broadcasting authorities, arts councils, research councils, etc. It is not necessary for them to be under direct state control. Their charters and the social backgrounds of their governors ensure their function. Provided that the socialist analogues of such authorities have founding charters open to popular amendment, that they have supervisory committees who are socially representative of the people, and that their deliberations are public, popular control would be assured. The powers of demarchic councils would be either regulatory or economic or both. An advanced industrial society requires a complex body of regulations to function. In present society, some of these regulations are what we recognize as laws, emanating from the decisions of politicians and enforced by state power, but a larger part already originate in autonomous bodies. Professional organizations define codes of practice binding on their members. Trade organizations define standards for industrial components, something absolutely essential for rapid technological progress. International bodies define standards for the exchange of electronic data by telephone, telegraph, and fax. In many cases, these regulations affect only the internal operation of particular branches of production or social activity, and the composition of their regulating councils should be remained limited to people who participate in that area. In others, areas like broadcasting or processes which may impinge upon public health, general social interests are affected. In these cases, the regulating council would have to be extended to include a majority of other citizens, selected by lot to represent the public interest. The other powers of demarcate councils would stem from their command over resources, humane or inanimate. A council might be entrusted with the administration of certain immobile public property, buildings, historic monuments, transport routes, energy and water supply facilities. To the extent that these are immobile, the principal contradictions that may arise are over access. One thinks here of how the proprietarian-dominated British Commission responsible for ancient monuments denied the dispossessed access to Stonehenge. But to the extent that the property deteriorates and has to be maintained, even immobile properties presuppose an influx of labor and materials. A council will also be entrusted with mobile public property in the form of machinery, vehicles, and raw materials. This is more significant for demarchees administering manufacturing processes, but would affect them all to some extent. We assume that all such mobile property is ultimately allocated by the national plan. A council running a project has the use of the property unless and until a more urgent use arises. Finally, a council disposes of the labor of the members of its project. Since this labor is a fraction of society's total labor, and could potentially be devoted to other activities, it is, from the standpoint of the national accounts, abstract social labor. Similarly, the flow of mobile public property into the project presupposes a fraction of society's labor being devoted to the production of these items. As a flow, therefore, it too is abstract social labor. The dynamic economic power of a council is, finally, command over social labor. The magnitude of its power is measured in the hours of its labor budget. But by what right does it gain this power, and who regulates its magnitude? It is a power that is either devolved or, in the last resort, delegated by the people themselves. Consider a council administrating a school. Its power might be devolved from some local or national educational council who vote it an annual labor budget. Let us assume that schooling is a local matter. In that case, the budget of the local education council would be set by the local electorate, who would annually decide how many hours were to be deducted from their year's pay to fund education. In the case of a manufacturing council, the delegation is more indirect. Its products, perhaps lead-acid storage batteries, meet an indirect social, rather than concrete and local, need. The number of batteries that society needs is a function of how many cars, telephone exchanges, portable radios, etc. are manufactured. Only the national, or in the long term, federal, planning authority can calculate this. Thus, only the planning authority can delegate a budget for battery production. In all cases, the people are the ultimate delegators of power. Either they vote to tax themselves and entrust a demarcate council with a budget to produce a free service, or they choose to purchase goods, in which case they are voting labor time to the production of those goods. The great virtue of the rule of the demos was the elaborate constitutional mechanism they evolved to defend their power against usurpation by the upper classes. That rule flourished for some 2 centuries until crushed by Macedonian and Roman empires. During that period it generated a beacon of art, architecture, philosophy, science, and culture that illuminated the subsequent dark centuries. The Enlightenment golden age of bourgeois culture was a self-conscious reflection of that light. The torch will not truly be reignited till the modern demos come to power. End of chapter.